Marney, as a veteran journalist, you've been reporting on religious news for over 2 decades. Why is religious media coverage of Israel so vitally important? How can faith-based reporting change the negative dialogue about Israel?
First of all, Abra, thank you so much for having me, inviting me to be a part of this conference and for sitting on this panel. And I think I'm the only one on this panel who's an evangelical Christian, is that correct? Yep. And so I'm going to be speaking, yay, from the perspective of an evangelical Christian. But first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory on myself. I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto, and I happened to grow up on a street where there were, there's a Torontonian back there. Happened to grow up on a street where there were only two non-Jewish families on that street. Bathurst, well, actually close to, it was more close to Bayview. You know Toronto? Yeah. It's not that way now anymore, but back when I was growing up in the 70s, there was only two non-Jewish families, one of which was my family. We were Protestant, Christian, and the other family was Catholic Italian Mafia, who lived across the street. I never did see Mr. Pucci, only read about him in the newspaper, but he lived there, we knew that. And so I grew up with Jewish neighbors, Jewish friends, Jewish classmates, and so I always had appreciation for my Jewish friends. Actually, I never felt different. I always felt that we had something in common, a strong bond. And so actually coming to Israel and being amongst my Israeli friends and my Jewish friends here, I actually do feel very much at home. But I'm going to be speaking from an evangelical Christian perspective. So why is it so important to us, this nation Israel and the Jewish people? Actually, I think Israel is important, not just to the Jewish people and the Christians, the evangelicals, but Israel is so important, vitally important for all nations, for the world. So, yes. So I'm going to give you three clear points I'm going to roll them out in my answer here. And the first point is that I believe Israel is a litmus test of the heart. A litmus test of the heart of the individual, a litmus test of the heart of a community as well as a nation. So what exactly do I mean? Well, let's see. About 3 years ago, a world leader came and visited Israel. I'm not going to tell you who it is because I'm sure I'm going to offend some people, but I'm going to tell you that the jury was out for me in terms of what was really going on in the heart of that world leader. So I watched him. We get a feed as journalists, so I watched his day-by-day, play-by-play, all the places that he went, the people he met, the things that he did, the photo ops, and I must say my final analysis of that particular leader was that I came to the conclusion that my original suspicions were true, in that I really was not convinced of his genuine nature and his heart because I saw the way he treated Israel. And I saw the response of the Israelis and the sting. When he left, it was like he had slapped the Israelis in the face. And so that, for me, convicted me or convinced me of what was going on inside in his heart. Israel is a litmus test of the heart. And I just actually was in Europe a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, people ask me all the time, where are you from? And most people think I'm from the United States. I love the United States, but I am Canadian. And I love Canada too. And because I was coming from Israel, and I've lived here now for a number of years, I said I've come from Israel. And I say that specifically. Why? Because I get a glimpse of what's going on in their heart. And either it's a love, oh, Israel, wonderful, where do you live? I live in Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, that's so fantastic, you're so blessed and lucky. Or I can get another completely different reaction, as probably many of you get as well. But I do that on purpose. Why? Because I get a glimpse into the individual's heart. Secondly, why Israel is so important is because it's a prophetic timepiece. It's a prophetic timeline. 24 years ago, when I started out in television, the senior producer of the Crossroads Christian Communications Show, it's a daily Christian, evangelical Christian television program that I was a part of, that I was a producer and a reporter. We had a meeting, and the senior producer, he said to us and said to me something that stuck with me. And he said, the camera frames out far more than what it frames in. In other words, when you're creating a story, we need to position that camera strategically and intentionally so that we tell the greater story. So in other words, okay, so if this is our event and we just focus in on one corner of the entire, we could slant what's really actually happening. So not that we're telling a mistruth, but by the way that we position our camera and angle our camera, we can actually bring across something that is not entirely the whole truth. And so we need to be intentional and we need to be strategic so that we tell the whole story. And so that's what I've been trying to do. Now, like I said, I'm an evangelical Christian, so for me, if let's say I got an exclusive in the greatest interview ever, what would that be? Well, it would be the ultimate prophetic event, which for me is the coming of Messiah. And for me, because I'm evangelical, I believe it's the return of the Messiah. I know my Jewish friends believe it's his first coming, and that's okay. When he comes, one of us will say, "Told you so." Actually, I don't think we'll be saying that. I think we'll be so in awe of his coming. And but we agree on that point, and that's a great. I mean, for me, that's the ultimate prophetic event. And but before that happens, we know from scriptures, from the wonderful Hebrew scriptures as well as the New Testament scriptures, there are going to be other events that are also significant that are pointing to this ultimate prophetic event, and I call those prophetic signposts. So when I am strategically placing my camera, when I am figuratively and literally, I am looking for those prophetic signposts, those events that point ultimately to the coming of Messiah. And so of all nations in the world, there is one nation that serves as a gauge from which we can monitor the unfolding of the prophetic events. And of course, that's this nation Israel and the people of Israel in Israel and also outside of Israel. So whether or not I'm doing a story about water technology in Israel, or Christians that are out on the fields of Samaria harvesting the grapes, or about the exponential growth of French Aliyah, I'm always looking for, some of those have really profound prophetic signposts, and some of them are not quite so profound, but yet I try for all my stories to include them. Okay, so they're flashing me. I need to wrap this up. Another thing quickly, I'll just make this point. I could talk for a long time on this, but Israel is also for me a flashing beacon of God's character and especially his faithfulness. So when I learn about Israel, when I do stories about Israel and I see the miracles that happen in the face of war and missiles, and when I'm seeing the blessing on the land and I'm seeing the fulfillment of Scripture, it just speaks to me of God's faithfulness, and it draws me as an evangelical closer to the God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God of Israel, who is also the God whom I love. And lastly, I'll just throw this in because this is usually what people start with. When we bless Israel, we get blessed. And so that's another reason why we always want to posture ourselves to be a blessing to the nation and the people of Israel.
Thank you so much, Marney.
Thank you.